Christopher Voss spent 24 years inside the FBI, rising to become the Bureau's chief international hostage negotiator. He's the mind behind techniques that reshaped modern negotiation.
I started studying outside of law enforcement to get better and attended Harvard Law School's negotiation course and then went to that course. And at Harvard, they said, you're doing the same things that we're doing in the private sector. The stakes are different, but the dynamics are exactly the same.
How did the middle part go until you were the lead negotiator?
I went back. I had originally been rejected for the negotiation team by the head of the team in New York because I was eminently unqualified, like in no way, shape, or form, other than a desire to do it. And I said, there's got to be something I could do. And she said, there is. Go volunteer on a suicide hotline.
The co-author of the global bestseller, Never Split the Difference, and the founder of the Black Swan Group.
What portion of professionals do you see just kind of wing it? How do they all come in with the same kind of curiosity and vigor that you did?
No, they don't. First problem is the realization that negotiation is a perishable skill. Because if you go to negotiation training, there's a pretty good chance it's really good. Like I went to suicide hotline, their training was phenomenal.
This is Chris Voss.
Chris, I'm super excited to be here with you today. I've read your book. I followed a lot of your stuff. So I'm super excited, first of all, that you're joining us with our top agents, but also being able to have this conversation before we go into the large group format. For the people that don't know you, if you could just give us the quick background to give a little bit of context of who you are and how you came to be who you are today.
Yeah, I was the FBI's lead international kidnapping negotiator, and in getting better at negotiations with the FBI, I started studying outside of law enforcement to get better and attended Harvard Law School's negotiation course and then went to that course. And at Harvard, they said, you're doing the same things that we're doing in the private sector. The stakes are different, but the dynamics are exactly the same. So then after I got out of the Bureau, I wrote a book about a few years afterwards, wrote a book called Never Split the Difference, which you just mentioned. And it's been pretty much a best-selling business negotiation book on Amazon since it came out. So we got about a 7-year run of being number one. And we found that it applies to all aspects of life. Anywhere humans are involved. Communication is about collaboration, great, sustained, profitable communication. Long-term profit is really about collaboration, not adversarial. And then how do you turn an adversary into a collaborator? So that's what the book's about. It's done really well. The masterclass has done really well. Some of the stuff that we put out there. So I'm going to turn back on you, though, real quickly. You said you read the book. What did you get out of the book?
So I'm a real estate agent. That's my background. I'm now a corporate executive, but I started as an agent. And very early on in my career, I realized that the best realtors I was looking up to, the best entrepreneurs I was looking up to were really good at negotiation. So I feel like most people in business don't treat it like a craft, right? They start, if you go back to like Michael Verber's E-Myth, it starts as a doer, right? Whether it's a product or service, you get really good at the doing.
Uh-huh.
And then there's an entrepreneurial fit. That's what he calls it in the book, where you go, you know what, I can do it better than this guy who pays me. And then you're like, I'm going to go do it on my own.
Right.
And then you realize that the doing is like this much of it versus the 80 or 90% of whatever that entrepreneurial journey looks like. So to your question, for me, real estate, in the beginning, most agents are like, oh, let me learn how to generate a customer or unlock a door or learn the process. And I early on realized that negotiation was probably the most important value proposition I can deliver to a customer. When I was in my early 20s, I don't know if you'll remember this one, Karis Institute of Negotiation.
Yeah.
It was so long ago, I saw it in a magazine on the back of a plane.
Yeah.
And I attended the course, and it was expensive. But I remember I was the only real estate person in the room, and I was in the room with ExxonMobil executives and commodities traders. And the guy teaching the course called me out from the front of the room and said, that dude will be the worst or best negotiator in the room because they only come in two flavors. Real estate people tend to be really good at negotiation or very bad at it.
All right.
And I took that away as, negotiation in what we do felt like such an important skill set to learn and perfect, right? Because I think that's the value proposition that someone in our profession actually delivers to a customer.
Well, and here's the attribute also, it's you probably take for granted, but you go into Karis, to do this, you got to be willing to invest in yourself. And there's some people that believe that if experience is the best teacher, they've decided it's their only teacher. Right. Now, you didn't do that. You decided to go out and try to learn from others, adapt the knowledge into your environment. But that step for a lot of people is, how do I go out and spend the time, read a book, take a course? Those are the people that get better in negotiation.
And so what portion of professionals do you see just kind of wing it versus, and even in the FBI, how do they all come in with the same kind of curiosity and vigor that you did? Because you went outside of what the FBI had as well.
No, they don't. The first problem is the realization that negotiation is a perishable skill, which is really hard to do. And you got to kind of get it sort of shoved down your throat and have a big mistake. Because if you go to negotiation training, there's a pretty good chance it's really good. Like I went to Suicide Hotline. Their training was phenomenal.
That's by the high stakes one.
It can be. I went to learn a skill. And then I at the hotline, which is just emotional intelligence. It's applied emotional intelligence, which is what tactical empathy is in the book. It's applied emotional intelligence. It accelerates deals. So some people, like the NYPD, they didn't put the emphasis on training that the FBI did, and the head of the PD's negotiation team says, well, if you're out doing it, you don't really need to train it. Well, Tiger Woods didn't believe that. But how I found out, I'm doing all my shifts on the hotline. For a year, you're doing 2 shifts a month. I'm on there, and I got different moments of innovation, insight. But I didn't train for a year. I just did it. And at the end of the year, I got evaluated, and I failed my evaluation. I failed horribly. And they were like, you think just doing this keeps you good at it? Like, you got to study, you got to practice it. You got to, Tiger Woods spent time on a practice tees. If you don't, your skills deteriorate and you don't know it. You think you're good, but you're not.
So I didn't want to interrupt, but as soon as you said that, I got really curious. So before you even get on the phone the first time, is there a baseline and then there's some experiential learning before you can kind of perfect it and tweak it? Because before you get onto the court or the field, you can watch all the videos.
Yeah.
That's it when you need the...
Well, you got to find a way to make the practice low stakes. And the way they did it for us was we got about halfway through the training, and then, they'd role play with you a little bit to make sure that when you answer the phone, you didn't say something stupid like, why don't you get yourself together, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, stupid advice. But then you get on the phone and there'd be somebody there to supervise you, and as soon as you got off the phone, you outbrief the call. And they tell you, what you did well. And pretty much on hotline, as long as you're not giving advice, you're helping people out. As long as you're just a sounding board, it's remarkable how giving advice hinders people. Because it makes them disempowered. If I have to give you advice, then I'm telling you, I don't think you can figure it out yourself. I gotta help you discover it. I gotta guide you in some way. So, and then you're taking calls while you're in training, and then by the time you're done, you're pretty good. Because the training is good. I knew I was good. And I took that for granted, and my skills deteriorated slowly over a year, which was the lesson that I learned. I'm practicing constantly these days.
And so you started there. How did the middle part go until you were the lead negotiator?
Well, I went back. I had originally been rejected for the negotiation team by the head of the team in New York. And because I was eminently unqualified. Like in no way, shape, or form, other than the desire to do it. And I said, there's got to be something I could do. And she said, there is, go volunteer on a suicide hotline. Now, there's another lesson in there is, never take direction from somebody who hasn't been where you're going, or from somebody who isn't where you want to be. She was the head of the team. I should listen to her about that. Now, I wouldn't have listened to her about a lot of other stuff. So anyway, I come back to her about 5 months later after I'd been on the line for about 5 months, and I'm saying like, hey, I want you to know I volunteered, and I've been volunteering for about 5 months. She's like, you're kidding me. I could tell everybody to do that. Nobody does it. Most people don't take advice from the right people. So that accelerated. I got the very next opportunity. I was 5th in line for the next opportunity to be trained. I got into Quantico. I got a head start on everybody because I've been on the crisis hotline. I got the foundation of emotional intelligence operationally, understood it. And so I roll through the training, and I'm actually contributing to the Q&A sometimes and helping them teach. And then shortly thereafter, the idea of showing up. Don't wait till you called, show up. And there was a bank robbery with hostages in Brooklyn. I didn't get called, I showed up. Me and another guy showed up. I ended up being the second negotiator on the phone. And 90 minutes later, one of the bank robbers is surrendering to me outside the bank. I had the skills that I had at the time, and I took the coaching in the moment from a guy who knew what he was talking about. And, bada boom, bada bang. There was a guy who came out and surrendered to me. And I love to teach. And so I started teaching how that scenario went down. And they were testing me at our main unit. They were watching me to see, they knew I knew that I should be out there teaching. Most of the people that got trained wouldn't get out and teach on their own time, come up with all the materials on their own, scrounge for the resources on my own, take initiative and take instruction. And then they promoted me to be part of the unit that was in charge of everything. And I just kept stepping in, and I had a knack for the international stuff. And most things went right. Occasionally something didn't. And when something doesn't, then how do you rebound? That was ultimately, I had a case go really bad. A bunch of people got killed overseas. And that's how I ended up at Harvard.
So that was a pretty definitive moment for you.
You got to get crushed somewhere along the line. You can be as much as you could possibly be without going through some really tough stuff. The problem with that is it's not a great teaching model. Like, I can't take you out and intentionally crush you by a certain set of circumstances. But the best have always been crushed 2 or 3 times by circumstances. And then how did they get up? Do they quit, or do they get better?
I have a 7 and 9-year-old, and that concept is really aware in my head.
Yeah.
Because some of the most pivotal moments in shaping me were some of the worst. And as a parent, you want to protect them from everything.
Right.
But I know that that's not what creates greatness in character or any of those kind of defining moments in life.
Adversity creates character. Stress creates capacity.
So how'd you go from that to the private sector and becoming who you are today?
Well, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to finish. My father was a small business owner, entrepreneur. But I wanted to wait till my law enforcement career was over, and it came time for me to get out. And then I went back to Harvard, and I got a master's degree in a program that was just for old people. They called us mid-career professionals. And then while I was there, I knew I wanted to get into consulting, coaching, training, and people said, you got to put a book out. Got to get a book, no consultant. Nobody goes to a consultant if they don't have a book. And do it right away. And I'm like, I'm not doing it right away. I need proof of concept. I just don't. One guy that left NYPD was a great negotiator with NYPD, and he laid everything out in a book. It said, here's what we did at NYPD. Now you go try it in your world. And there's not enough proof of concept there. It's too big of a jump. So after I got out, the universe was kind enough to give me an opportunity to teach an MBA program at Georgetown, master's. And we really, with a lot of help from my son at the time, we refined and we developed the FBI skills into business negotiation. And then, if you're a professor of a class, you set the criteria. And I made you use our skills in the real world, not practice. Vast majority of the negotiation training from my colleagues at Harvard and Wharton, it's practice, pretend negotiations. You're selling an iPhone, and I want to buy an iPhone.
I felt like that about my college professors teaching business classes.
Yeah, there's pretend stuff. And a lot of the data from the academics about negotiation is from pretend negotiations, which is why you got to be careful of it. But I made my students do it in the real world. And then we had a succession of case studies. I mean, I've got 200 in total on all aspects from Wall Street to husband and wife negotiating over what kind of Christmas tree to buy. So when we had enough different real life examples, we never split the difference together. Like, here's how it worked in hostage negotiation. Here's how it worked in a regular world. And here's what to say. Then I've been out for about 5-6 years when we put the book together.
And what was the biggest takeaway from going from one sector to the other for you?
Well, all the dynamics are the same. I mean, really are the same. The two things that I didn't expect, which we've really dug into since the book came out, one thing we call proof of life. And in kidnapping, proof of life is a person, the bad guys you're talking to, do they actually have the hostage? And are they going to release them to you? Is there a deal, and is the deal with you? And in the rest of the world, there are a lot of people that are kicking the tires, looking for free consulting. They're going to talk to you, but they're not going to give you the deal. They want to pick your brain for free. And they're going to disguise that by saying, yeah, I want to do business with you. Tell me how you do what you do. Give me your presentation. Come to my house. Give me your marketing presentation.
Or go show me a bunch of houses and I'm not really
showing a bunch of houses. Yeah. So ferreting that out, we actually have a whole protocol to figure that out in 15 or 20 minutes instead of 6 hours or 6 weeks of showing houses, giving presentations, and then having them go dark on you. Like, the earmarks are all there. In hostage negotiation, we had to learn, we called it high-risk indicators. Not everybody's going to let the hostage go. And there's a profile there that you can pick on if you're willing to see it. And as a hostage negotiator, you can't go like, I'm here to save every life. Well, that could blind you. You got to walk in with eyes open and look for the guy who's not going to make the deal.
And at that point, do you stop and give it over to the other team?
Well, what you do is you got to lay it out to the other side that you know what they're doing. And you got to lay it out in a way that doesn't anger them or make them feel accused. It's the equivalent of being a straight shooter. And you could even say, it sounds like no matter what I say, you're not going to let them out? And you'd say it just like that, with that tone of voice, and that's exact phraseology. And that's very similar to what you would do in a business deal. It sounds like you're still shopping around. That's somebody who's kicking the tires. So understanding that adaptation is one of the biggest things we've learned. And there's a few other things, who's really on the other side. In any given interaction, there's a decision maker, there's a deal killer, and there's a trusted advisor. In business, in corporate interaction, in real estate sales.
Say that one more time for everybody. You said that so clear.
There are 3 characters you got to identify, all of whom can kill the deal. Everybody focuses on the decision maker. The decision maker is at best only half. The deal killer. And then the trusted advisor. Now, the deal killer might be at the table, but they're going to be dead silent. You're talking to a husband and a wife. Husband's doing all the talking. The wife ain't saying a word. Wife's the deal killer. You got to understand how to appeal to her. You can't talk to him and ignore her because he's doing all the talking. They've also got somebody in their world who's a trusted advisor, who's really going to tell them which way to go. You got to say, sounds to me like there's a way that you typically make these kind of decisions. Sounds like there's probably somebody whose opinion you really trust. If all 3 are not bought in with you, doesn't matter how good you are. You can be best in class. And by the way, if you are best in class, you are the candidate for having your brain picked, for having the tires kicked. And a lot of real estate people that we've coached have said, I'm the best in my industry. That nobody's gonna play me for the fool. And we say, who do you think they're doing due diligence on? Somebody who's last in the industry? My trusted advisor says we're going with number 3, but I want to know what number 1 is doing so that I can make number 3 do it. So if you are the best there is, you're by definition due diligence.
And so that's fascinating concept of the trusted advisor, because that resonates very well. Do you try to get them in the room? How do you win the trusted advisor, especially if they're not sitting at the table?
Well, you got to understand, you got to recognize the process. Like, this is a life-changing deal. It's a life-changing decision. It's the most stressful decision in your life. It seems like there's people you rely on to help you guide you. It's gathering information without asking questions. Now, the best way, everybody knows you got to gather information. They don't know that asking questions is often the worst way to do it. So, I just threw out a casual observation of a recognized human dynamic. I'm going to watch you react. I got to listen with my eyes. I got to gather data with my eyes. I got to see, I can tell if we've been talking, I could tell if you're going to give it to me right away or, if you kind of dodge a question. You've already got a recommendation from your trusted advisor before you sit down with me. I got to know if I made the short list. And your reaction is going to tell me that. Because if your trusted advisor is including me, you're going to let me know right away. You got nothing to hide. It's the truth and it's honest. If your trusted advisor hasn't included me, you're going to go like, well, yeah, but I'm really here to hear what you have to say. That's a dodge. You dodged that. And a lot of people will be suckered and say, oh yeah, you want to hear more from me? Okay, I'll start talking. And I'm going to miss that you ducked that observation. Now, I'm not in the loop. Then I could tell that your trusted advisor either didn't recommend me or doesn't even know who I am. Then I'm going to say something like, seems like you're just still shopping around. And I say it in a way like, that's okay. That's not an accusation. It's just an observation. And I'm going to tell again whether or not you're telling me the truth. A few years ago, I'm interviewing a guy. He's supposed to be a confidential witness. He's supposed to be a witness to robbery of a video store. And through talking to him, my gut's telling me that the reason why he knows so much about this, not that he heard about it, that he participated. Now, if I'd have asked him, did you participate in a robbery? He would have been, no, I didn't do that. If I'd have asked a question, if I'd interrogated him. But while we're sitting there, I go, you know so much about this because you were there. And he went, yeah. So how do you really get information out of people? The worst way is usually to ask and either trigger a response from you. And it's one of our skills we teach. It's called labeling. It feels awkward, takes some practice getting used to. But once you get used to it, it's becomes second nature. Like any other habit, everything is learned. But you don't see it around you because it's invisible. Like if you don't know labeling and you hear me labeling somebody else, it's going to sound like conversation to you. You're never going to notice where I was pulling information. And that's one of the both great things about the skills and also the thing that's harder to learn because you don't see the examples around you. They're invisible. Great emotional intelligence is completely invisible. And it has its biggest impact on a person it's directed at. And they will be changing and bonding with you and opening up to you in a moment. And an onlooker has no idea what's going on, but you're creating magic.
Yeah, no, it makes me think of the subconscious things I learned along the way where instead of saying, are you working with an agent, which is a confrontational question, I normally would say, how have you been getting into home so far?
There you go. Completely different approach. It's the recognition that something is going on. If you're gonna ask a question, the how and what questions are the best because they feel differential. They don't feel accusatory. The whole list of open-ended questions are interrogatives. The hows and the whats, there's great power and deference in their very deferential questions.
Walk me through how some folks who are high interpersonal, high, in their own mind, perceived emotional intelligence, in my experience, have a kind of have an adverse reaction to the word sales or negotiation because they're like, no, I'm here to facilitate and help, versus they feel that sales or negotiation is confrontational. How do you reconcile for them? Because to me, it's the same thing. And from our conversation, even before the cameras got started, I know that's how you think.
Yeah. Well, first of all, what are some of the myths? Like the myth, great salesperson, or the great salesperson is one who talks people into stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that's the evangelical minister that gets everybody to come forward and give their lives to the religion, and Monday morning they are not following through. You feel really good. You talk people into stuff. I actually had one minister tell me he switched his approach, the call to the pulpit, completely away from the old traditional way to, our tactical empathy. And he's got more people coming forward and sticking to it, because that's the thing. Do they stick to it? And when you talk people into something, don't stick to it. Because as soon as you're not there, who's going to keep them engaged?
It's like just creating emotion.
Yeah. So the great salesperson is actually a great listener, great observer. There's a charming, quietly charming, complimentary, but with legitimate compliments. You look great today. You say that all the time. Or like, look, that's a great pair of shoes you got on. The observational of what's really there. I remember a long time ago, Bill Clinton was great at genuine compliments, because he'd look at you and see what mattered to you and compliment you on that, instead of, damn, glad to meet you. So are they really connecting? Are they really paying attention to the person across? That's an earmark of a great salesperson, and going with a gut. And listening and connecting, which also then, as you transition from sales to negotiation, which is much earlier than most people realize.
Yeah, talk about that. I like that.
Well, sales is getting I want or I need in somebody's head. And as soon as I want or I need is in their head, you're in a negotiation. Now, most people only think about real estate agents. They think they're in a negotiation when they finally get to their fee. Like, you've been in a negotiation for a long time before you get to your fee. Was it that in the one Tom Cruise movie, you had me at hello? Shortly after hello, you're in a negotiation, because they're sizing you up. You're building trust. I mentioned before the trusted advisor. They got to trust you. Are you hustling them? Are you constantly trying to get them to say yes? Getting people to say yes erodes trust, because they've been yes battered. So many people have been bamboozled with yes, that if you're getting people to say yes, you're succeeding in spite of that, not because of it.
Interesting, because there's a lot of sales techniques where it's like, get 7 yeses and they're done.
Yeah. If that worked, people make a lot more money. And the problem is, there was probably a point in time when it worked, but so many of the people that are selling products that are bad for you have used that approach that everybody's been hustled.
Yeah.
Everybody's been hustled, been talked into something multiple times that they didn't need over the yes momentum. And so what that does is it creates an instinctive adverse reaction to yes. And so if you're using it, you are succeeding in spite of it, not because of it.
And so you said something earlier. One of the things I used to teach my agents when I was still selling was, I want to get to a no as fast as possible, because then we know we're not wasting our time, right? Ready, willing, and able are the things I always looked for before even setting an appointment. Is that negotiation as well?
Well, it's very close. Like, I don't know if you ever read Jim Camp's book, Start With No, where you came to it instinctively. Jim Camp was a football coach, Air Force fighter pilot, and a salesperson. And he found that he would succeed. He wrote a book called Start With No. And he wasn't into getting people to actually say no. Like, we've taken that concept and taken it to the next level. But he let people know he was comfortable with the word. And what you just described is, you're not horrified by no. You're comfortable with it. And you're communicating intentionally that you want to know if there's nothing going on here, because I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste mine. No accusation. Just let's be comfortable with one another. And intention has a smell. So you're giving them a vibe. If you're looking to get to know as soon as possible, you're not accusing them of anything. You're letting them know it's okay. And there's a lot of power in that. When you're consistently driving for yes, then you're communicating that you're afraid of no. And what Camp said in his book is that saying no preserves people's autonomy, and people will die over their autonomy. Ultimately, I collaborated with Jim while I was still in the FBI, because I was like, that's the central issue of why we have hostage negotiators, people that die over their autonomy. And you're implementing it in a business world to great success. So getting, being comfortable with no, which was your approach, and you found that it accelerated your business.
Yeah, because again, to me, the most valuable commodity we have on this planet is time.
Amen.
Right? So if I could get to know, if somebody called and said, hey, what's 123 Main Street listed for? I'd say $350,000. Is that within the budget you're qualified to buy? And or yes, actually, that's all right in my price point. That right there told me if they were ready, willing, and able very quickly in just one very casual conversation.
Right. Yeah. And they're initiating with you. Like, you're not initiating with them going like, would you like to buy a great house? Would you like to,
unless they're an open house.
And that's in an open house. But again, they're initiating a conversation with you in that regard. And your approach is respectfully, just information gathering. And I can see why it would be a perfect way to proceed.
So in general terms, I think there's probably a large percentage of people who read your book or see the title of your book and go, okay, that probably doesn't apply to me.
Yeah, well, they're going to see the title and say it doesn't apply to me if they're not in the reading, if they're not curious. If they're curious, they'll split the difference. I mean, wait a minute. I thought I was supposed to split the difference.
Exactly.
Let me see what this is about.
Well, I'm even referencing it like if someone's in a administrative kind of not sales function, I still think these skill sets are phenomenal.
That's what we found. The fun thing about it is any professional that's in communication, if they're really good at it, and then when they never split the difference, they're like, oh, it filled in so many gaps. It's different than a traditional approach in so many ways. And it's like when you've been struggling with a problem for a long time and you just can't quite figure out the answer. And then suddenly somebody comes along, if you're really curious and you're struggling with it, and that's the fun thing about it. I never saw it as a sales book. And it's hugely popular with seasoned salespeople. Or anybody who likes emotional intelligence. They like to interact with people, with them, not against them. There's a sales approach out there that says, your money's in their pocket and it's your job to get your money out of their pocket. That's not succeeding with people. And there are moments when you have great successes, but long term, you're not there. One of the people that we coach at a very high level was a very cutthroat negotiator. And he said, I made so much more money being collaborative than I ever made being cutthroat. So there's a long-term prosperity to collaborate with people.
Yeah. No, there's definitely a breaking point, right? Because if it's an adversarial relationship, and it's even like seeing your margins, right? If you have a, out of asymmetric margin compared to your peers, you're probably not going to keep it very long, right? Because you're probably slash and burning versus creating a sustainable harvest.
Yeah, amen. Agreed completely. Yeah.
What would be a parting thought for folks who, are intimidated by the subject? What do you think holds people back? Like, for example, very intuitively, I didn't tell you, I was 23 years old sitting in the Karras Institute of Negotiation.
Good for him.
With, 50 and 60-year-old ExxonMobil executives.
Yeah, very cool.
But some part of me has always been very curious, right?
Yeah.
For me, it's like, if I can get tools that nobody else has, then game on.
Yeah.
But what do you think holds people back from that curiosity?
First, the perception that negotiation is adversarial, or that the best negotiator is the loudest, toughest, most angry person in the room, person who kicks a chair across the room. You know, the founder of Blockbuster. Most people don't know what Blockbuster was. Blockbuster was a video that went the way, a store that went the way of the dinosaurs. Blockbuster had the opportunity to buy Netflix and turn them down because they didn't think Netflix was a good investment. Like the Netflix guys laugh about how they were begging Blockbuster to buy them. But that guy was famous for slamming his hands on the table in negotiation and storming out. And he got his way a lot. Blockbuster dominated the video world for a while. But here's a guy who's getting his way with anger. And he looked like a superstar. And now nobody knows who he is. Not only does nobody know who he was, nobody knows who his company was. And so I think that's one of the perceptions of negotiation. One of the reasons why it's done so well on Masterclass is because most people who are studying negotiation don't want to be seen as the biggest jerk in the room. And so getting away from that perception. To me, the greatest negotiator is probably Warren Buffett on Oprah. Everybody likes him. Everybody likes Oprah. So get over that. Let go of the myth that it's about making the other side lose is the first thing. If you can define it as collaboration and then be curious, and then you'll make more money that way long term, then I think more people can open up to it.
Perfect. And what's the journey that people should engage with? You start with the book, watch your masterclass. How would people who are curious, especially after watching this?
Well, the book and the masterclass are a combination that really set people up for accelerated learning. And it doesn't matter which one is first. But the people that are really accelerating their learning who will then come to one of our trainings and get the most out of it. The consistent thing is they read the book and they took the masterclass. So they took the masterclass and then they read the book. And both are ridiculously cheap. Like masterclass is Hollywood studio level video. And it's like $180 a year. You know, what's that? A little over $12 a month. And the amount of learning you can get out of it, the book's $20-some. So minimal investments. Those two combined give you enough of a foundation that if you do an online training with us, or you do live in-person training, like you're ready to go. You're ready to get into some live training where you can ask a question, or you can be there with some other people, or you can do an immersion. So those two really set a cornerstone to then really move forward with some of our other training after that.
Well, awesome, Chris. Thank you so much for your time. I'm looking forward to hearing you do it live for my folks right after this podcast, but it was a pleasure.
Thank you, man.